Hello, and welcome to Budget Commander. On this channel, we'll discuss Magic the Gathering topics with a focus on playing Commander on a budget. We'll cover things like deck building, top cards, deck techs, and more. Let's get started. Hey friends, today we have a Geth Lord of the Vault deck tech for you. This is a budget deck tech, specifically 1DH, meaning all the cards in the deck are $1 or under, with the exception of the commander, who can be up to $5. Prices were checked as of the day of recording using mtgstocks.com, so the total cost of the deck was just under $45. Know that the prices I have listed in this video will vary depending on when you see it. Prices can fluctuate going up or down, so they might be different when you see this video compared to the day of recording. Geth Lord of the Vault this deck tech is specifically Reanimator, so we're trying to bring stuff back from the graveyard, capitalizing on his activated ability, which says pay X in a black, put target artifact or creature card with converted mana cost X from an opponent's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, tapped. Then that player puts the top X cards of their library into their graveyard. So we just want to get a lot of value off of him, picking the best artifacts and creatures from our opponent's graveyards and putting them onto our battlefield. There are a couple other paths to victory aside from just having the best good stuff on the battlefield. The first one is through his Intimidate. So we can get in for commander damage by getting in 2 or 3 swings after Geth's been pumped up and knocking somebody out that way, as that's a great evasion. We also have the potential to mill players out, as we're going to be forcing them to discard cards from their hand, as well as the top of their library, not only through Geth's activated ability, but through some other abilities, through other cards in the deck. As always, we're going to start out by talking about the Accelerants. These are the cards that allow us to get more mana so that we can get into our game plan. We already kind of talked about what that is, but we'll talk about some specifics there. Then we'll talk about the cards that interfere with our opponent's game plan, hopefully blocking them from doing what they want to do, and then the cards that provide us consistency. Lastly, we'll talk about the lands, the utility lands, as well as the ones that provide us mana so that we can cast all those spells. So, starting off, Accelerants. Not actually true Accelerants. We have Traveler's Amulet and Armillary Sphere, which can pull swamps out of our library into our hand to smooth out our land drops so that we aren't ever missing land drops. We also have some ways to get artifacts back from the graveyard, so those are great. We also have Darksteel Ingot as a mana rock. More mana rocks, Heraldic Banner, Mana Geode, or as a relic. The relic we can get in the graveyard so that we can get that back and draw some cards and gain some life off it. Geode scries for us. Heraldic Banner gives all of our black creatures +1/+0. Seer's Lantern, Unstable Obelisk, Hedron Archive, all tap for colorless mana but have some other extra utility to them, allowing us to scry, destroy a permanent, or draw a couple extra cards. Getting into our game plan, so we want to try to mill our opponents out so that we can get cards with Geth or our other spells from their graveyards onto our battlefield. Ghoulcaller's Bell and Worry Beads mill our opponents. Sands of Delirium does the same, but instead of being universal for each player, it's only specific to a target player, and we have to put mana into it. We also have Trepanation Blade, Bone Horde, and Lash Writhe, which all pump our creatures up as equipments. The Trepanation Blade mills an opponent until they hit a land when that creature attacks. Bone Horde gives a creature +1/+1 for all the creatures in all the graveyards, and Lash Writhe gives a creature +1/+1 for each swamp we control. Bottomless Pit is going to force each player to discard a card at random, so really hard on those control decks. Liliana's Reaver, if it gets in for combat damage, is going to give us a 2/2 zombie and force an opponent to discard a card. And then the Silumgar Scavenger is a 2/3 flyer that over the course of the game is going to get bigger and bigger and just cause our opponents problems. Here are some cards that gain us life and also drain our opponents some, which allows us to stay in the game longer, hopefully allowing us to execute our game plan. Sangromancer gains us life whenever our opponent's creatures die or they discard a card. Grey Merchant drains our opponents when he enters the battlefield, and then the Pontiff of Blight gives all of our creatures extort, allowing us to drain our opponents so we can further put pressure on them and help give a buffer to our own life. To protect our game plan, we have Elixir of Immortality. Yes, it gains us life, allowing us to stay in a little bit longer, but seeing as we're milling so many cards, this will allow us to protect our own graveyard. So if somebody tries to exile our graveyard, we can shuffle all those cards back into our draw deck and hopefully draw those great cards again. It also protects us if somebody else is playing mill. Since we're going to also be playing sort of a mill strategy, we don't want to mill ourselves out, so this protects us from that. Tormod's Crypt and Nihil's Spellbomb are ways that we're going to interfere with our opponents if they get some kind of a combo going with their own graveyards. Seeing as we're helping them put stuff into their graveyard, we can exile their graveyard to shut that down. Doomblade is just a great kill a non-black creature spell at instant speed. Hero's Demise does the same, except for it's targeting a legendary. Plaguecrafter and Fleshbag Marauder force our opponents to lose their resources when they enter. The Marauder gets a creature from each player, the Plaguecrafter gets a creature, a Planeswalker, or forces them to discard a card from their hand. Murder and Price of Fame also force our opponents or allow us to target a creature to destroy. Price of Fame comes with Surveil, allowing us to put more cards into our own graveyard so that we can recur or reanimate them later. Eldest Reborn does all the things our deck wants to do. Forces our opponents to sacrifice creatures, forces them to discard cards, and allows us to reanimate something from any graveyard, assuming it stays out for all 3 turns. Yawgmoth's Vile Offering is a legendary sorcery, making it a little bit harder to cast because we need to have a legendary creature or planeswalker on the battlefield, but it will allow us to reanimate something from any graveyard, as well as destroy any one creature. It does get exiled afterwards. Drana Crolistria Bloodchief is one of those legendary creatures. She's just a great utility creature, 4/4 flyer that we can pay X to destroy creatures with by giving them -X toughness. She does also gain that power until end of turn. Fell Shepherd is a great creature that's hard to block beneficially for our opponents. We can also sacrifice creatures to help get rid of our opponent's utility creatures or force them into bad blocks so that they're losing creatures through combat. Helping us to control the board, we have Mutilate, which is essentially a board wipe. -1/-1 for all creatures, equal to the number of swamps we control. Hex we can use to destroy 6 target creatures. And then Butcher of Malakir forces our opponents to sacrifice a creature each time one of our creatures dies. We do have a couple of sacrifice outlets, so we can get a lot of value off of that, helping us to control the board. Ob Nixilis is a great card that we're going to use to destroy a target creature and then uptick him, drawing us cards and losing us 1 life each time we do it. Here's the cards that provide us consistency. We're going to draw cards with Sign in Blood, forcing us to lose 2 life, unfortunately. Spark Reaper is a 2/3 that we can sacrifice creatures to gain life and draw cards. And Dread Presence has Swamp Landfall. Whenever a swamp enters the battlefield, we're going to draw a card and lose a life. We can also choose a second mode, which allows us to deal 2 damage to any target and gain 2 life. So we can kind of control getting rid of those small utility creatures or lowering our opponent's planeswalker loyalty count, things like that. Siphon Mines forces our opponents to discard cards, and we get to draw cards equal to the difference. Gaunty Lord of Luxury allows us to pick a card off of top of our opponent's library, put it in exile, and then cast that card at any time. It only lets us look at the top 4, so not a lot of selection there. I recommend you target the green or white mage, as being in black we don't have a way to deal with enchantments, so this could give us the potential to destroy, exile, force an opponent to sacrifice an enchantment, which is what we probably need from Gaunty most of the time. Damnable Pact, we're going to pay X life and draw and lose X life. Sorry, we're going to draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the amount of mana we want to dump into this card. So a lot of card draw off of this one. Now getting into cards that reanimate, we have Unearth, Blood for Bones, and Diabolic Servitude. Blood for Bones allows us to sacrifice a creature to get 2 back. Unearth, we get something with CMC 3 or less back. And Diabolic Servitude gets us anything back from our graveyard, and it sits out until that creature gets removed. Then Diabolic Servitude gets returned to our hand so that we can cast it again. That creature, however, that we got back the first time will be exiled. We have Zombify, Ashen Powder, and Necromantic Summons, which allow us to get cards back from graveyards to the battlefield. Some are our own, some our opponents, some from any. Also, if we have Spell Mastery when we cast Necromantic Summons, we get to put 2 +1/+1 counters on that creature. Rise from the Grave, Beacon of Unrest, and Ever After allow us to get more cards back from graveyards to battlefields. Mostly creatures, but the Beacon of Unrest allows us to get an artifact as well, which gives us a lot of versatility there. Ever After allows us to get 2 of them back, and then Rise from the Grave gets 1 card from a graveyard to the battlefield. Boneyard Parley, we're going to get more cards back from graveyards to the battlefield. We're going to take 5 creatures from all the graveyards, whatever the best 5 are. One of our opponents splits it into 2 piles, and then we get to put our favorite pile onto the battlefield tapped. We already talked about Geth, Lord of the Vault. Stitched Together is going to get another card back from a graveyard, either to our hand or the battlefield, depending on if we have Threshold or not. Now we're getting into cards that recur, so not quite as good as Reanimating, but these ones will return creatures from our graveyard to our hand. Fortuitous Find can help us get an artifact. Soul of Innistrad is a 6/6 Death Toucher that gets 3 creatures back if we get to activate his ability. Then we have Haunted Fengraf and Memorial to Folly, which get creatures back from our graveyard to our hand. Mortuary Mire allows us to put a creature from our graveyard on top of our library so that it's our next draw. These cards all help ramp us a little bit. Mage Ring, Network, Myriad Landscape, and Temple of the False God. Mage Ring, we can store mana in. Temple of the False God taps for 2 colorless as long as we have 5 or more lands. And then Myriad Landscape, whenever we don't have anything to do with 2 mana, we're going to activate that ability to ramp us up a little bit by plucking 2 swamps from our graveyard to the battlefield. Barren Moor, Desert of the Glorified, and Polluted Mire are all come in tapped and give us a black, but they have the versatility to allow us to cycle them, which is why they're in this deck. Opal Palace, we have that so that we can put +1/+1 counters on Geth, because like I said, we can try to get in for commander damage and wipe an opponent out that way. Rogue's Passage is just a great utility card that gives a creature unblockable. Then we have Blighted Fen, which forces an opponent to sack a creature. Leech-Ridden Swamp, which allows us to force each of our opponents to lose life, keeping that pressure up. And then we're running 28 swamps. The average CMC for this deck was 3.77. You can see the mana curve there. If this deck looks fun to you, give it a go. Let me know how you liked it. If you like the idea of having a few different paths to victory, either just getting good stuff from graveyards, getting in for combat damage, possibly milling your opponent out, try this deck out. It's a lot of fun. Otherwise, let me know which commander you'd like to see next. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Peace. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, you should like the video. You can subscribe by hitting the icon in the top left. YouTube thinks you'll like the video on the top right. Otherwise, you can check out one of the playlists on the bottom. Have a great day.